Welcome to Adapted, the podcast where we explore adaptations of various forms. I'm today's host, Tom, and with me is...
Patty G. Still not going away.
It's still not going away, audience. Let us know on Twitter or X if you enjoy Patty G. But anyway, today the two of us will be discussing Forrest Gump, the novel from 1986, and its film adaptation, Forrest Gump from 1994. We may even dive into the Indian film adaptation from 2018 if we feel like we want to do that to ourselves. If we're feeling particularly masochistic.
You can. I didn't. I couldn't. I couldn't watch it. I couldn't watch it. If you wanted to, I think it's worth talking about it. I mean,
Yeah, we
I
can
saw it.
mention it.
I couldn't do it. I just
It
couldn't do it.
is. It's taking things almost beat from the film. It's not at all inspired by the movie, but anyway.
By the book, you mean?
Excuse me, by the book. Yes. So anyway, getting into this, Winston Groom wrote the novel in 1986, and it's somewhat unusual in the 20th century. Groom is calling back to something known as the picaresque tradition that originated in 16th century Spain, and that comes from the word picaro, a Spanish word meaning rogue. And it was a very popular genre in Spain in the 16th century, and it's usually about a person living on the fringes of society who endures these many strange episodes in pursuit of no particular goal whatsoever. It seems almost as if there's just a random collection of episodes that this somewhat lovable rogue goes through. Critic Harry Sieber describes the evolution of the picaresque in these terms. The genre has an initial phase in Spain, which follows an alienated hero. We could think of Don Quixote, and Cervantes actually wrote a number of these picaresque novels. And then the second phase later on, which we could see in England and later America, follows instead an anti-hero around whom this new society is formed. So we see more of a social structure around an anti-hero later on. This initial picaresque novel from 1554 was Lazaro de Tormes, and it follows Lazaro who seeks to live in a world that is impoverished. He is a character who lives by his wits and exposes the hypocrisy of society. And that idea of living by your wits is something that's very popular in the picaresque hero. And it's kind of ironic in Forrest Gump anyway. There is another interesting picaresque in Germany from 1669 that I found by Hans Jakob Christoffel von
Have you
Grimmelhausen.
read these? I'm just
I haven't
curious. Have
read
you read
these.
these?
I've
Yeah,
been
I
like
haven't. I've
reading
never even heard
parts
of
of
these,
these.
but
Well, I've read Don Quixote. I've read Don
I haven't read it. But
Quixote,
obviously, yeah. But
and I've read the 18th century ones. So I haven't read this one, which is called Simplicissimus from 1669, and it's about a man who is so simple he doesn't even know his own name, and he goes on a collection of adventures led by a wise hermit. One of the adventures involves him being kidnapped by dragoons and forced to serve in the 30 Years' War. And so I imagine, I don't know for certain, but I imagine this is an influence on Forrest Gump. We see this, though, in the English tradition as well. The first English book, and this one I have read, that works in the picaresque is Thomas Nash's The Unfortunate Traveler, which is just insane. It came out in 1594. A lot more of these come out in the 18th century, and this is where Henry Fielding, whose most famous picaresque novel, Tom Jones, sort of takes
the one
center
we should
stage.
have done instead of Ben-Hur.
Yes, yeah, the long book and long movie we should have done instead of Ben-Hur. It's an excellent book, but it kind of captures this anti-hero type who ends up being redeemed and becomes sort of the center of a new society at the end of it. It's a very funny book. A bunch of stuff happens. We see a bunch of social classes being explored and characters of different means. And so you end up getting a kind of collective social image. In America, though, this form is less popular, but it was extremely sought after when it was published. So Huckleberry Finn has a lot of elements of the picaresque. John Kennedy Toole's novel, A Confederacy of Dunces from 1980, is another one that has elements of the picaresque that was very popular.
I love that book. That's such a good book.
That is a very good
I
book.
wouldn't have thought it as picaresque because I always thought picaresque they have to wander. But you're right. It is certainly picaresque. He never leaves New Orleans, obviously, but it certainly has that element.
It does. I think it has elements of it.
No, I agree.
I don't think it
Yeah.
is in itself. I think there's a sort of randomness of action
I
that
totally
happens in
agree.
it.
I hadn't considered it, but you're totally right. It
Yeah,
does. It absolutely has elements of picaresque. I wouldn't have noticed it, but you're totally right. It does.
yeah. I think the most picaresque American book, though, is John Bart's 1960 novel, The Sotweed Factor, which is just an 18th century picaresque published in 1960, which is a book about an American, excuse me, a Brit who comes to America to take over a farm in Maryland. He encounters pirates, hordes of prostitutes, con men, etc. He goes on it's a wild adventure that at its heart is a searing critique of America. And that's another element too that tends to be wrapped up in the picaresque is the satire element. And Barth's book is extremely vicious in its satire. But that brings us to
You didn't talk about the
19
best picaresque, though. You got to talk
what is the
about.
best picaresque?
You got to talk Candide.
Oh, Candide. I'm sorry. Go for it. Yeah.
Yeah, it's like you missed Candide.
I
That's
did miss
like
Candide. Yes.
I think that's the best picaresque, I think. That's the Voltaire's as you said, 18th century take on the picaresque. And in that one, the idea is Candide is the young hero and he has been taught by his this is where, I think this is I hadn't heard of the German one. I Candide is where I assumed he was getting his stuff from. Because as I read Forrest Gump, I had very low expectations. And as I read it, I mean, I don't usually, I mean, like, I don't think I rarely would laugh out loud at a book. I laughed like very, like, there are some parts of it that are uproariously funny. And I realized as I was reading, I went, "Oh, this is Candide." And so in Candide, the idea is he has his philosopher teacher, Dr. Pangloss, who teaches him that this world, despite anything bad that happens, this is the best of all possible worlds. So there's no, even though bad things happen, this is the best that it could possibly be. And if anything were to change, it would make it worse. So it's this very sort of optimistic worldview, but also just kind of stupid worldview. So he gets taught this philosophy, and so he goes through the world, and despite all of this like disaster after disaster after disaster that occurs to him, including such, which again I think this is where the novel was pulling from. That he goes to like South America and finds El Dorado, the ideal society, and is living there, and they finally get like kicked out and they take all this gold with them, and then they lose all their gold, and despite these absurd, it just gets more and more and more and more absurd. And everything that happens, he keeps saying, well, this has to be the best of all possible worlds. It's been proved to me that everything that is happening isn't actually bad. It's the best possible thing that could have happened to me. And so that's sort of the absurdity of it. And then, I'm sure we'll get to the ending of the book at some point and we can compare it to the end of Forrest Gump. But that's I think that is the ultimate picaresque. Like that's the classic picaresque
And it
in
works
my mind.
also because Candide is a mid 18th century book, and it's written at the time when this is the best of all possible worlds is really the philosophy of the court.
Is
It's
that
Condor's.
Leibniz? Who is it?
I would say Condorcet. Maybe Leibniz said this. I think of Condorcet at that time, who is basically he's what we might today call an economist, but basically he says that evolution is, or not evolution, excuse me, that morality is evolving to be better. Just as technology is evolving to be more advanced, our morals are evolving.
Which is a very modern idea. I mean, it's sort of that is the ideal of progressivism, is
Mhm,
that we are progressing, that we can perfect our morality.
mhm. Yeah. And that's what he says. And that's kind of really in the French Enlightenment tradition, I think a lot more than in the Scottish Enlightenment tradition, is this idea of perfecting morality. Even though the utilitarians give it a whirl, but maybe less said about them the better. But yeah, that seems to be the French thing. And so Candide gets that kind of satirical element that comes in and out of different picaresques, but it gets it on all of these different levels, but especially this kind of grand philosophical vision, which ultimately in the end they all just kind of go, "What? No, that doesn't work," and they move off of it um, to
Well,
tend
that's
their own
the famous
garden.
line. That you can say the famous line because I know you like that line so much.
Oh yes, now let's go all and tend to our own garden.
Tend to our garden, yes.
Mm,
So at the
yeah.
end of the book, the whole thing is all of these people that Candide has met throughout his journeys, they all get together in the end, and they all kind of gather back together around Candide, and they are in just various states of just horrible things have happened to them. My favorite is the old woman who has literally had her butt cut off, and she can't sit down because she has no butt. Like again,
So, but they cut
there
it off. I think pirates cut it off to eat it,
I
right?
don't
They
remember.
were
Somebody cut it
hungry.
off to eat it. I don't remember why. Because yeah, she was with Candide's love, whose name I can't remember. And Candide's love was with the old woman, and I think yeah, they got like captured by pirates, and then they were starving. And I think then the old woman, I don't remember again. I don't remember if she has a name, but the old woman's the old woman's butt is cut off. So this is also, we should be clear, some of the humor is it's not necessarily of the highest brow, but it's very funny. And so she can't sit down. But the idea here is that so they finally, and I think even like Candide's love has had like so many horrible things happen to her that now she's basically just like hideous. She's ugly, and Candide finally gets her, but she's ugly because she's been through so many horrible things. And I don't even remember what's happened to Dr. Pangloss, but like every bad thing has happened to all these people. They're all in horrible, horrible shape, and they finally decide like, okay, everybody, we're not doing this anymore. We are not pretending that we are rebuilding society and that everything is good right now. We're just going to farm by ourselves quietly and
Mm.
just sort of we will tend to our own gardens, and we will just sort of, it sort of has this it is kind of almost Ayn Randian sort of idea of just like we're just gonna be our own person and let no one tell us what to do, and just we're gonna be we're gonna be by ourselves because we just clearly whatever else we're doing isn't working.
Yeah, I think it picks up on another idea of the Enlightenment. I don't think it's throwing over the Enlightenment at all. I think it's still a modern text. It's saying, yeah, there's some kind of independence there, but it is, I think, rejecting many, many elements of it. Um, you know.
I think it's saying, I mean, I agree, but I think it's an Enlightenment text, but it's an Enlightenment text in it's sort of the Voltairean sense that like fix yourself, like work on yourself, and that, be a simple person, don't try to be a person who is, I mean, Voltaire certainly didn't think that, he certainly was trying to change society, but he wasn't, the idea was like be a simple person. You don't need to be Hercules, this sort of this idea of, you can be your own person, and by doing that, if we all do that, that will change society. That will make the perfect society, and we'll all be sort of like the noble savages. We'll all just sort of be like children in the world. Like that was the vote. That's Voltairean, is everybody being a child.
Yeah, I think it is. Yeah, maybe returning to childhood. I also think it's a sense of um, planning things out in a grand way is is what you're saying. Planning things out in a grand way is never going to work, which is a Herculean thing. That's what you're saying, right? You can't do that. I mean, I think that's where you get touches of the Enlightenment in it that it's supporting, which is a part of the Enlightenment, especially the Scottish Enlightenment, is a de-emphasis on certain types of planning. Other parts of the Enlightenment are an emphasis on extreme planning, but that's
But
why I think
in
it's
an
not.
Adam Smith sense, I
Mm,
guess I would say, if you're going to tie it to Scottish Enlightenment, Adam Smith's the idea of the baker doesn't make his bread because, he's altruistic or because the king has told him to. He does it because that's what he does, and he needs to get paid to buy his own stuff. Like he's not altruistic here. He doesn't have some grand philosophy. He bakes his bread because he has to bake his bread. And that's one of the sort of core tenets of Adam Smith is if you just let people do what they need to do, they
it'll
will
work
make the
out.
best decisions. It will work out. And that's, I guess, where I sort of see Candide sort of working out is just tend your own garden,
Yeah,
work your own thing. And if we all do what we're supposed to go do,
it'll be
and we
fine.
don't, yeah, we'll be fine. We'll actually be way, way better
Hmm.
in that sense. And that's how I guess I sort of see it working.
Yeah, that's how I always thought of it as. when I think of the book, it's been a while since I've read it, but I've thought of it as
I only read it over the
embracing.
summer. I think I read it like a few months ago, so that's why I read it.
Oh,
Yeah,
I
so
read it
that's
20 or 30 years ago.
oh yeah, I read it over the summer, so that's why it
Yeah,
was like very strongly in my head as I read Forrest Gump. I'm like, oh, it's Candide.
yeah,
Like
I've
that's
read.
great.
It's not the most recent picaresque novel I've read, but yeah, so I think it does have that kind of. I always thought of it as embracing that kind of Adam Smith idea of a non-planned society, right? Like that's what you said. It's almost Randian in its conclusions, but it is in retrospect, or now that I've read more French Enlightenment, it is rejecting what was probably principle in its society at its time, which is this world is great and we're just going to make it even better and better and better and better. And what the book shows is in a very funny way is just the world is horrible. And if you go to the hermit right at the end, they talk to the hermit and they're like, well, what is the deal with the world? How does the world work? And he's like, you're rats on a ship that the king sent to another place. Like the king doesn't care what happens to the rats. He'd rather not have them there. There's no like divine plan for you. What do that's it. That's the conclusion. You're just rats on a boat that are incidental to what the boat needs to do. And that's when they go, okay, we need to stop this. And they go tend to their own garden.
So I guess now we can talk about Forrest Gump, the
We
novel,
can
and
talk
how it's
about
and
Forrest
how it
Gump.
is and how it's by Candide. Because again, this book is very, very funny.
Yeah. So,
So let's start with some of the incidences. I think it
yeah,
would just be that
some
are
of the
that are
incidences, and
different from the movie.
yes, I imagine our audience is, if they haven't seen the movie, this movie has passed into meme world so successfully that they probably have felt that they have. So I think by comparing this book to the movie would be the best way to summarize it. We could start with the character of Forrest Gump, who has roughly the same IQ as the Tom Hanks version of the
I think it's
character.
exactly the same number. I think
It's
they
like
both say
75
70. I think no, I
or
think it's 70.
70.
I think they
Okay.
both say 70.
Mm. But this Forrest Gump discovers he has many hidden talents. So those
Well,
include,
firstly, one thing before we even get to the hidden talents, which I think there's a very good reason why they cut that out of the movie, but you can mention that. But the thing is, what I found really interesting about this character, and they make it kind of clear from the beginning, and this is not true about the Tom Hanks one, I don't think. The Forrest Gump in the book says fairly early on that he actually understands a lot of what's going on around him. He gives an example when like a guy, he's walking down the street and somebody says, "Hey, can you, move a bunch of boulders or something for me or move a bunch of barrels of dirt or something?" And Forrest Gump does it. This is when Forrest Gump's a kid. Forrest Gump does it. He moves like 14 or 15 barrels of dirt. And at the end of it, the guy says, "Hey, great, I'll pay you $1." And he pays him $1. And Forrest Gump knows that he has been cheated, but he says he can't say it. He just doesn't. That's what he lacks. He sort of knows what's going on, but oftentimes, even when he sort of understands the situation and knows what's going on, he just can't. He can't express anything about it. So, and therefore, everyone thinks he's a moron, but he actually knows what's going on. The only indication you get in the movie is the like, I know what love is. That's the only like that's his only attempt to be like to show that there's more going on in his head than is actually being expressed. But the book makes it very clear. He knows a lot more about what's going on. He just can't do any, he lacks the capacity to express it or do anything about it, right?
Mhm. Yeah, I would agree with that. He's a keen observer, and it's also a first person narrative, which is also in keeping with the tradition of the picaresque. So you sort of need a more keen observer than what Tom Hanks's Forrest Gump would indicate because he needs to tell he's the guy who tells us what's going on.
Yeah,
So he
because like
needs
Benji can do it. It's a totally different book. Benji and
but yeah, Benji, you have to do a lot more work.
yes, exactly.
Right? When
So,
Benji's like, I saw the house and didn't see the house and saw the house and didn't see the house, you have to go, oh,
oh, he's
okay, he's
rolling down a
spinning,
hill. Yeah, he's rolling
or
down
he's
a hill,
rolling down
whatever,
a hill, or
whatever it was.
whatever
Yeah.
he's doing. Or I looked down and there they were, and then I looked down and they weren't there anymore, and you're like, oh,
I
fixed
did
him, didn't
not get the
they?
fact that he was castrated. Different. No, that was one that came out in AP English class, and people went, "Wait, what? Oh, I missed that detail."
Yeah.
Ladies and gentlemen, if you'd ever care to read that, that is William Faulkner's Sound of the Fury. But
And maybe we should do bad adaptations and look at the James Franco adaptation of The Sound and the Fury, where
does James
James
Franco plays?
Franco
Does he play
played
Benji?
Benji. Yes.
That's really bad.
Yeah. But
Um,
anyway, back to
Anyway, so
this.
Forrest Gump is not a moron. Yeah,
Mhm.
he observes things. He just lacks he sometimes lacks capacity within the context of the events he's
Mhm.
narrating to act or to do what he thinks he should do.
Mhm.
Right?
Yeah. He struggles with communication, it seems. Um, there's also other major difference. So that is the probably the most important difference, and it speaks to the difference, I think, in medium. You have a book, you
True.
need this person to narrate it, so you need to make him capable of doing that. You don't really need to do that with Tom Hanks, though it makes the Tom Hanks version of the character a lot less interesting because he's
Well,
just
because he's less
there.
interesting because he can't do anything. Like in Forrest Gump, for the most part, there are a few incidences that are different. But the problem with the movie, this is the biggest problem with the movie, is that he doesn't do anything. It's just things happen to him, and he doesn't. Not only is he incapable of understanding what's happening, he doesn't make choices. So what is the point of this? There's a few incidences where he makes an actual choice, but like when he goes to save, like when he goes into the jungle to save Bubba, and ends up saving all the other people. That is at least a choice that he makes. But most of it is like, oh, he was running across a football field, so he becomes a football star. He was doing this thing, so he's playing ping pong, so he becomes a ping pong player. And that's in the novel a little bit, but he usually makes a choice along the way to do other things.
He's pressed into making a choice, and what the book keeps emphasizing is, except for the shrimp, the choice when he's pushed into making a choice and affirms something, it gets him in trouble. So his choice ends up being the beginning of an episode, which usually ends disastrously, and disastrously in a comic way. This is not a tearjerker book or anything like that. So yeah, his choices are there. There is a bit of things he has unexpected capacities, so he ends up in a situation and he suddenly has an ability to do something that brings him a lot of attention and a lot more adventures. And so a few of them are he is unbelievably athletic. So he's like 6'6", I think, and 240. He's
Something like that, yeah.
described quite lustily by one man as a Adonis at one point when they strip him naked for some reason. But he's also incredibly fast, which they find out in his high school football team when a bunch of people are chasing him and he just happens to run past the coach, and the coach is like, "Oh God, you can't just block, you can actually run." And this leads him to being a college football star. He also discovers while stranded on an island with a bunch of cannibals that he is a master chess player, and by
To be clear,
continuing,
this is not in the movie.
oh yes,
This
there
particular
is no
detail is not in the movie.
cannibals in the movie to speak of,
He's
but
also
this.
stranded. He's stranded on this island. I think it's Papua New Guinea after he
Mhm.
has been launched in a spacecraft with an orangutan and a female pilot. I think she's supposed to
Like
be.
she's a
She's
really
like the captain.
irate, yeah,
Yeah,
captain.
she's very angry, and so
Mhm.
she's like the captain, and so they crash land, I think, in Papua New Guinea,
Mhm.
and so yeah, he learns he's an expert chess player while playing the cannibal who went to Yale. I
Mhm.
think the
Yes.
cannibal went to Yale.
And as long as he keeps beating the cannibal, they will not eat him. So he does that for about 4 years. He also discovers he is a math prodigy because when playing football at college, they need him to take a few classes. So they put him in a graduate class on light. I think it's called Intermediate Light,
Intermediate
which
light.
such a good title. And they discover, and then they also put him in a gym class because they're like, okay, you could pass the gym class, fail intermediate light, and that'll be fine. We can keep you here. But he ends up being a genius and getting an A in intermediate light, but he cannot remember how far apart goalposts are. So he ends
Goalposts
up
are in a soccer, yeah, soccer goalposts.
failing gym class, and that gets him booted out of college. So it's filled with like these weird, funny things like that. And he ends up going into the spacecraft because he goes to protest the Vietnam War under the pressure from Jenny, throws his medal at the Washington Monument and or the Lincoln Monument and
That was at the
hitting.
That was at the Senate House. I think it's at
Was it at
I
the
think it's at
Senate
the Capitol. I
House?
think it's at the Capitol because
Oh, it's at the Capitol.
I
Okay.
think he hits like the Speaker of the House. It's not Speaker of the House, but something like that. I thought that's what it was. But anyway,
Yeah, it was like a senator, I think, or
I think a
somebody
senator or
big,
somebody hits somebody
and in
important.
the
Yeah.
head and knocks them out and is going to go to jail for 10 years, but makes a deal that he turns into an astronaut because he's a math genius. So they're like, well, you could go into space. And so all of the he ends up having all of these really unusual talents that people sort of accidentally stumble into. And he really doesn't want any of these talents. He doesn't seem to care that or have any kind of pride in any of them. And in fact, all he sees them do is get him in trouble. So when he goes to enter a chess tournament under the pressure from an aged chess master, he's just, oh no, I have to do this. I'm going to get in trouble again, and Jenny's going to get mad at me. And so he has these kind of weird talents as well.
And then he
In
ends up meeting a naked Raquel Welch.
the That episode's really funny. Yeah, he meets
Who then? But my favorite is Raquel Welch. The only thing she has to hide her nakedness are two giant leaves from a banana tree. So she's walking down the highway, and every single time a car approaches her, she covers her front, and every time a car comes from behind her, she has to cover her back. So she's just walking down the street, waving banana leaves back and forth, which is doing it again. It's just funny.
yeah. Yeah, that whole episode is funny because like the obvious solution is just go back into the studio, but they just keep running down Santa Monica Boulevard for some reason. Um,
She needs to find a clothing store.
yeah, to get clothes, but you think just go back into the studio. But anyway, whatever. I mean, it is very funny. He ends up saving the life of Mao Zedong at one point.
That's my favorite. It's one of my favorite lines in the entire thing is when he goes to meet when he has dinner with Mao Zedong, and he has and Mao Zedong is like talking to him through the interpreter. Mao Zedong says to him like, "What did you think? I hear you were in the Vietnam War. What did you think about it?" And he says through the interpreter, "I think it's a bunch of," and Mao Zedong just starts looking at him like at first like, "Did you say what I think you said?" And then just bursts out laughing. And they have like everyone's like, "What did he say to Mao Zedong that this guy thought it was so funny?" I did like that episode.
I also like towards the end of the book, he ends up running for Senate. And
Oh, I
in his
forgot about that. That's one to forget because it's just tossed in so quickly at the end.
It's tossed in quickly at the end, but I still found the line where so a kind of joke that's running through it is whenever he has to give a speech, he always has to go to the bathroom, and he ends up at the beginning of a speech keeps saying, "I have to pee,"
I've got
which
to pee.
I've
That they
got
put
to
in the
pee.
movie. I've got
Yeah,
to pee.
hmm yeah. And when he's running for Senate, they put him up there. He doesn't know what to say, so he just says, "I have to pee," and that becomes a very popular slogan, and people are like, we have to pee, we have to pee, and people are interpreting it as this like complicated populist sign, and his enemy, the person he's running against, his slogan turns out to be I have to pee too.
That was pretty good.
So
Yeah, that was really good. I have
yeah.
to pee too.
Oh, so
Again, it's a very funny book.
it's very, very funny. I think I am going to read the sequel, but and it's also from reading these kind of other picaresque books, it follows them pretty closely. I mean, he's sort of a roguish figure. The irony, though, I think, is like living by your wits, right? That's a thing these people do. They have to like get out of scrapes by living by their wits, and he doesn't really have that capacity in the book. And so there's a bit of a kind of irony there. Um, I don't know. I will say I'm not entirely sure what the social critique is supposed to be in Forrest Gump. I
I mean, I
think
guess
there's
there's
supposed to
one.
be one. That's a difference probably between this tradition and this book. Is I think it's probably a lot simpler than a lot of the other ones, but it's also just really, really fun and really funny. Um, I think also like Nixon selling the watches is
The
another
Nixon, I love Nixon selling the
really
watches.
funny episode. Do you want to talk about that one?
Yeah, so when he goes, so they do have the thing. He doesn't meet all the presidents, because I think in the movie they keep having him meet a president. In this one, he only meets Johnson, who he moons, which he does in the movie, and and he watches the Beverly Hillbillies with Johnson. So Johnson just seems to be a pretty nice guy apparently, and he meets Nixon, who's saying like, I'm not gonna go to prison, but he keeps pulling Forrest Gump aside and being like, you want to buy a watch? And he pulls his sleeve down. He'll have like 10 watches on and be like, I got really nice watches for you to buy. You should buy a watch. And I just love the idea of Nixon just like constantly going up to people going, anybody want to buy a watch? Like it was just a great little detail that
Yeah.
this guy just, you could have just kind of made fun of Nixon for being Nixon, but instead he just as it's trying to sell bootleg Rolexes. It's just like such a good little trick. It's just such a good little detail in there. And there's just a lot of little jokes like that that are very funny. I forgot about the I need to pee too, which is very funny. But it's just like there's just so many little details like that that are just very funny.
Yeah. Yeah, it's well worth the read. It's pretty quick. It reads very fast. It feels like a book out of another time, but it obviously isn't because of all the historical references. So
To
I
your
would
point, I
recommend
don't know
it.
what I don't think it has a
I
social
don't think
critique.
so. I mean,
I mean, I guess it's
it's
sort of it's got a vaguely, I mean, I guess it's got a vaguely sort of anti-war. I mean, he certainly doesn't like the war in that.
hot take. Someone doesn't like the Vietnam War.
Yeah, but this, I guess it's my
That's-
point is like, I mean, he doesn't like the Vietnam War. Um, I guess there's a little bit of a commentary on people sort of pursuing their dreams.
Mhm.
That's sort of the Lieutenant Dan is clear is the Dr. Pangloss figure in the book, and so he keeps meeting him, and Doctor or Lieutenant Dan will sort of teach Forrest Gump some philosophy. And I mean, I guess what is Lieutenant Dan's philosophy? That like, is it just everything works out, or you just kind of,
He doesn't really say that. I mean, he
what
doesn't
is
really have a
it?
coherent philosophy from what I remember.
I can't
He's
recall it either.
yeah, he says something while in bed about how the universe all sort of fits together in a way that we can't predict or understand. But then when you
Yeah.
see him again, he's like a drunk living on the
Well, he gives
street.
up it, and he
Mhm.
says, I gave up my philosophy. That was a terrible idea. Nothing has any meaning.
Mhm.
Um,
Yeah. Okay. So I think his philosophy is things work out. We won't know why. We don't have a vision. It's more complicated, but there's something guiding it. I think that's what he
I
said when
think
he was
that's
in the
what he's
bed.
saying. Yeah.
Um, and then
It's
it's
that sort
just
of idea of like, oh, when you look at a painting and you look at it, with just your face right up against it, you just see splotches. You don't see any of the beauty. But when you step back from it, like God can do, you can see the whole painting, and then you know why every single spot needed to be exactly, which again, it does have that. So this is why I say he's the Dr. Pangloss figure, because he does have that sort of, this is the best of all possible worlds. And even though you can't tell why there's just a splotch in this one spot, if you step back and see the whole painting, you will see that the painting actually is beautiful and that the artist had to put that splotch in the spot that he put it, which is essentially the idea of this is the best of all possible worlds. And so I think that's his philosophy, but there's no point to it. Like I don't think he's no one really has that philosophy in the modern age. So I
yeah.
mean, very
And
few
he
people do.
drops it very quickly.
Yeah, so I don't think there's any commentary, and eventually all the figures kind of come back, but that sort of feels more like the end of one of those can't hardly wait or something where they're like so and so went on to become an arborist, like
Yeah,
it's so they all come
but
back and
that's
they meet him,
happens in
and
all picaresque. In
it
a
does.
picaresque, they tend to end with everybody comes back together at some point, and
Oh, I'm not saying it's a bad thing. I'm saying, I mean, again, it is kind of funny because some of them come back in funny ways, but I don't think there's any commentary being made by their return or presence.
yeah, it's I
Not that
think
I
it's
could think
different
of, but
from like the Henry Fielding books or especially like the Barth novel. I just or Candide. I just don't think there is a real way to. I don't think he's
no,
saying
I think you're
anything
right.
about
And so
society. I think
it's
he's just
just
having fun. Um, trying to. I think he's just having fun. I think
which is fine. I'm
he's
glad I didn't
enjoying.
miss it like that. I guess the thing is, I
Yeah,
don't know if you'd be like,
yeah.
no, There's
I
absolutely he's making a commentary. He's
it's
talking about
clearly
intersectionalism or something. He's talking about the philosophy
he's
of modern.
affirming the rightness of Manichaeanism.
Yeah,
He's bringing
it's
back the
like,
Manichees.
did you not pick up on that? Yeah,
You
you need to eat your
dummy.
pomegranate seeds like the Manichaeans did.
Yeah.
Um,
Was that a
but
thing they did?
oh yeah, they had like certain types of seeds they had to eat, and it was like a weird, they had a lot of weird things.
Yeah,
Um,
I like in preparing for the next episode, I've been reading some Gnostics, and it's a fun little, but I haven't read much Manichaeanism.
no, I
Uh,
believe there was something. I mean, I'm not even joking. There was something weird like that. They had to eat like a certain type of fruit, like the higher ups. And I mean, it was literally a like, and then they would like poop out the seeds, and the seeds would have a certain like would contain the evil essence that they had carried. Like it was that sort of just weird. Um,
oh, that sounds very Gnostic. I feel like that might be something that the Gnostics did also. This sort
yeah,
of
I
like
mean, I think
bodily
it's,
evil thing.
but
Yeah.
The Manichaeans are a type of Gnostic, aren't they? They kind
Yeah,
of
yeah, yeah.
they're in the
Hmm.
same vein. That's what I mean. It's the same
Yeah,
vein.
they're the
It's
same
this,
general feel, yeah, or
yeah, and so
general principle.
yeah, the idea. So I'm pretty sure it sort of had that notion to it, but
Well, anyway.
Augustine kind of mocks it after a while. But
Mhm.
the so yeah, again, the point is, I don't think so. Okay, I'm just trying to make sure there wasn't you weren't going to be like, no, no, you missed this.
No, I don't think so because
No,
I
I don't
was
think so at all.
looking for
Okay,
it, and I mean, it's one of my frustrations with the movie is that the
let's
movie.
transition to the movie.
Let's transition to the movie, and we should say this movie was a long time in the making. It was shortly after the book was written. They gave the author a ton of money. He wrote three drafts of a screenplay that were pretty close to the book. And the problem was Rain Man. Um,
Okay, good.
yeah,
I figured that because I'm like, it's total. I'm like, because I said it. I was even saying when I watched this, I go, this why when I read the book, I'm like, why didn't they include any of this? I thought, oh, because he would be Rain Man. He
yeah.
would totally be Rain Man. Okay, that's what I
Which
figured.
is, yeah, this is why I think Warner Brothers, despite paying this guy like $600,000 or something, ended up passing because like, it's just Rain Man. We can't do another Rain Man. They did Rain Man, and eventually it lingered for a few years, and Columbia picked it up, and I can't remember who the first director was, but he left the project to do a relatively unsuccessful film, and they brought in Zemeckis, Robert Zemeckis, and Eric Roth to write the screenplay. So they took it from Grum and gave it to Eric Roth, who only apparently advised Grum just in order of historical accuracy. I think that was all they were really worried about.
Goodness, he didn't advise him very well. I mean,
Oh,
I
did he
guess it's
not?
historically accurate. I guess it's historically accurate.
Yeah, it's just sort of
They're
whatever. I mean,
the people that are there were in the places they were at the times he said they
yeah,
were there.
yeah,
It's about
that is
as
accurate as it
dully
needs
as
to
yeah, it's
be.
sort of dully as accurate as you can
Yeah,
get.
I mean the CGI was a big deal when it came out, and I believe it was nominated for that for visual effects, where you see um, Tom Hanks as Forrest Gump meeting these different people in kind of a newsreel thing, so it looks like he's actually meeting JFK. At the time, they were using pretty advanced blue screen and industrial light and magic tech to make that happen. So that was kind of a big deal when it came out. The movie ends up getting 13 Oscar nominations, with wins for Zemeckis, for Tom Hanks, for Eric Roth, and of course, it won the Best Picture Oscar, which is now on when you look at like Rotten Tomatoes and Metacritic, it's like at like a 73 or a 7 out of 10, 73% or 7 out of 10 on those websites. Its reputation has dropped in the last 30 years.
Yeah, I think because it's just it's nostalgic claptrap because I think it really appealed to a particular group at a particular time, and just who, and it's not to say that like there isn't some fun to be had with it, but it's just kind of boring, and there's not like what's the point? It's this isn't an interesting thing to watch for. I mean, it's long too.
Yeah, it's
Like it's
2.5 hours.
really
Yeah.
long, and then you sort of get to the ending and it's, it's sort of, it just feels like Like it just feels like they just kind of wanted to put in little. It feels like that movie. I didn't see it, but and I know there was a lot of criticism about that Disney movie that came out last year, the Wish one. And one of the
Oh, yes.
criticisms was they were trying to include something from every single Disney movie that came before it, and so it just became this sort of like find the thing. And that's sort of what this feels like, is like find the thing from 25 years ago that people will remember. And you just kind of went scene by scene and be like, oh, he taught Elvis how to dance. Oh, he was at the desegregating of the high schools. Oh, it just feels like it just has all he caused Watergate. Like it just keeps happening, and it just sort of
Yeah.
has this feeling after a while of you're not that clever. It's not that clever to just keep inserting him into this stuff where he's not actually doing anything. It's just he has no function or purpose, and that just got it just got very frustrating.
He's a blank slate upon which we can look back at the most notable moments of a boomer generation.
But only with like a sunny disposition, because Forrest
Yes,
is always happy. It's
he's
sort
always
of
happy and everything's kind of gleeful. And even the war.
they can't even have the balls to let him make a real speech about the war.
Mhm.
When he actually supposedly gives a speech that's meaningful and does something, they make the joke where they cut the microphone, and then the only person who hears it is the dude sitting next to him, who says he's really moved and very impressed with it. It was like, why couldn't she just say something? Like, I get it, I get the joke, he never gets to be heard and this kind of stuff, but it was like, you actually supposedly he did do something meaningful there, and you cut it out. What was the point? It just felt like they had no courage to make any real statements other than, yeah, blank slate statements where people could just
It's nothing anyone
see
could
it.
disagree with, right?
Yeah.
Which is they have the war was brutal. They're not even that anti-war, right? I mean,
No.
it's just the war was brutal. It was rough. You see the Black Panthers, but he's no commentary on them, other than sorry, I ruined your
Sorry I
Black
ruined your
Panther
Panther party. Which
party.
again, that was actually a funny line.
Yeah.
Sorry I ruined your Panther party. Like that's funny. But at the same time, it's sort of like, well, it's funny to hear him call it a Panther party. But at the same time, you have no commentary on the politics of the Black Panther. You have no commentary. You're just sort of showing them like, hey, remember the Black Panthers? Yeah, we remember
They
them. It's just sort
yes,
of
they
like,
were
yes.
there.
Yes, I recall their
Mhm.
existence.
Yeah.
I recall that was a thing.
Uh-huh.
But you've got nothing to say about them. You're
Mhm.
just pointing them out to me. And it sort of happens all the time.
Mhm.
Even the AIDS thing at the end sort of has this feeling of like, hey, AIDS kills women too. It just sort of has this feeling of like
Mhm.
it that there's
And
sort of just
then
this.
the other big thing, here's the other big thing that happened at this time.
Yeah, it's
It's
just sort
an
of like, hey, this is a recent one. This is still a thing, people.
mhm.
Like it
Yeah.
just sort of has that feeling to it.
Yeah.
Um,
And it's a bit condescending to him because in the book, like you're saying, he makes choices and he mostly understands what's going on. A lot of times he doesn't fully grasp what's going on. And part of it is he doesn't want anything. In the book, he doesn't really care about money. He just wants to be around Jenny. At one point, he wants to smoke dope, but that kind of desire goes away. And so in the book, he does things and he accomplishes things and you want him to kind of go forward and do things. In the movie, he doesn't really understand at all what's going on, and therefore he doesn't really matter. He's just there to see the historical circumstance, and it's funny that he doesn't get it. That's the joke. The joke is he doesn't get the relevance of the situation he's in. Well, in the
every single
every single time.
time.
Well, in the book, let's say he's at the chess match, he gets the relevance of the chess match, and that he can win
Yeah.
$500 if he wins the chess match, and he'll be a chess champion. He's not that interested in being a chess champion. It's something he can do. It's something he's good at. He probably enjoys chess games now and then, but he doesn't really care. And it's not he doesn't care because he doesn't get it, even though he might not get the full relevance of it. It's he doesn't care because he doesn't care about it. He just wants to have beers with his orangutan friend and see Jenny.
Well, I
Um,
guess the only thing, and this is also what bugged me about the movie, is that like so in the movie he does want to be a shrimp boat. he wants to be a shrimper. So because Bubba has mentioned it.
And
That's
in the
it.
book that he does want
That
that
is
too.
true.
In
But
the
there's a
book, that is
difference.
something he really
But there's a
wants.
big difference. So in the movie, he just wants to be it because Bubba and he had talked about it. He plans to do it. He knows nothing about it. He and Lieutenant Dan have the boat. Eventually, the hurricane comes through. It knocks out all the other people, and then they're the only one left in town. And so they become a shrimping monopoly, and he makes all the money, and then Lieutenant Dan invests it, and he makes all the money off Apple. Forrest doesn't actually do anything there other than a fairly, a fairly commendable thing of honoring his friend. He wants to honor his friend Bubba by having this company or by going shrimping, and then the hurricane basically is the only thing that actually makes sure that they become successful. If the hurricane hadn't happened and they hadn't gone out there, they would have failed, and there would have been no money to invest in Apple and for him to make his money. That's it. Like he doesn't actually really do anything. In the book, what happens is while he's in Vietnam, he's very curious and because he sees a guy selling shrimp and he's very curious how the guy gets the shrimp. And so he follows the guy and he talks to the guy and the guy shows him, oh, he's made a little shrimp farm. He basically he makes little nets in sort of shallow water, catches a few shrimp, throws them in there, feeds them, lets them breed, and then after a little period of time, he's got tons and tons of shrimp. So this is something that he thinks, oh, no one else is doing this in America. I could do this. So this is sort of, he's actually kind of entrepreneurial. And he goes back and he eventually comes up with this idea that he saw, does it of his own volition with, it's not with Lieutenant Dan. Who does he work with initially? Can't even remember.
Is it the one of the other football people?
Oh, I
I
think
know
it's one of the. He
he
hires the
hires
football
them.
people and he
Yeah.
brings his mother in later. I can't remember. But anyway,
Mm.
so he goes down there. He sets up all of these nets. It turns out this idea of this thing that he saw in Vietnam that he thought was a good idea works. They make a huge shrimp farms. They've then become successful. So the point is, there's a big, big difference between he had no idea what he was doing. The only reason he succeeded is because a hurricane came through. He didn't even know what to do with his money afterwards, and Lieutenant Dan had to invest it for him. He does essentially nothing. In the book, he does do something. He comes up with an idea. He is successful. He has something and he creates something of actual merit and value. And they won't even let him have that. They won't even give
Mhm.
him that in the book. That would have been at least something that would have been
In the
relatively
movie.
easy in the movie to include, but you can't even let him have anything. Everything that happens to him has to be totally random and by chance. And it just feels like, what was the point? You could have given him something, could have given him anything. And they don't let him do anything. That's what the movie bugs me about. It's just so frustrating to watch. And especially having read the book and gone, oh my gosh, the book is so much better. You just destroyed this character.
I suppose the idea would be that they would think it would be unbelievable that he could figure something out that somebody before somebody else. But I don't really know why that's
Maybe.
unbelievable. Well, because he's in a circumstance
But
that
again,
nobody.
you could have had him like you could have had him at everything else. It's just random and complete. It's complete luck whether he succeeds. But give him one thing that he saw and recognized the value in the movie. Give him one thing, and that's how he succeeds. He does actually get to do something then.
Mhm.
And
Yeah,
and
that's a good
then
one.
that I guess is the thing is like then you could have still had your fun with everything else. I still don't think it would have made the movie that much better, but you could have done something for him, and then we could have seen Forrest Gump do something that he should be proud of, and that he did accomplish something. Essentially, in the movie, there's nothing this man should be proud of. He didn't do other than saving Bubba, other than trying to save Bubba. I give him credit for that one, but for the most part, he doesn't do anything. It frustrates me.
Yeah, it is frustrating. Another big difference is the Jennies are
The
significantly
Jennies are
different.
very
They're
different.
very different. So the Jenny in the
Their relationship is very different.
yes, the relationship in the book is actually a relationship. It's actually a real relationship.
Very
Like,
conjugal. They're
yes,
very, very conjugal relationship.
it is, and it's seems to be genuinely loving on her part for him
Yeah.
and him for her. He's not some fool lusting after some woman who's, only going to come back to him when she has the most deadly disease on earth.
Yeah.
They have a relationship, and she really wants him to be kind of noble and better. And the first time they break up, it's because he starts having sex with a woman in an alley, and she walks in on them when he's high. The next time he breaks up is he's
Which, by the way,
arrested.
would have been a great scene for Tom Hanks.
Yeah, I mean, that could have been fun. But then the next time they break up, he's wrestling as the dunce, and she thinks it's undignified, and he keeps doing it, and eventually he
I think they
decides,
break up another time in between there, but I can't remember. I feel like they break up three times.
do they break up another
I
time?
thought there was another one that they break up on. I know they break
Hmm.
up when, yeah, when he's hooking up with the women. It's two women in
Hmm.
the alley. I thought there was another one. Maybe it isn't. Okay, sorry. Maybe there isn't. I can't
Maybe
remember
there
now.
is,
I
but
could have
in
sworn there
either
was another one. But
case,
anyway, sorry.
it's fine. Like it makes sense because, and then when they're wrestling, they're going to try and cheat someone out of money, and so she's like, you are not the person I fell in love with. You shouldn't cheat people. This is very wrong." And so she leaves him for that reason. And she also is, an anti-war protester, and she dates a little bit, but she's not some drugged up
No,
party girl
she's the
who's,
one who's telling him he's smoking too much dope. When he's
yeah.
smoking all this weed, she's like, you should maybe stop. Like, I think you're smoking too much weed.
Mhm,
Like you're starting to become kind of boring because you're not doing anything because you're so high all the time.
mhm. Yeah, they're in a band together, and the
Because it also turns out Forrest Gump is a brilliant musician.
yes, because why not? And
Which
he
he can
plays the
play the
harmonica.
harmonica.
Hmm. The Scrambled Eggs was their band, and um, and so he starts smoking weed a lot at one point. And eventually, gives that up after the breakup. But she's, a nice character, and she also survives in the end. She doesn't die of the most
No.
deadly disease ever. And they do have a child together, which eventually Forrest decides at the end of the book that he's, better off not being in the child's life since she has moved on and married someone else. In the movie, she is an abused young girl who grows up to be very promiscuous and involved in the peace movement, but seemingly because cool guys she's dating are involved in the peace movement. And
Yeah,
then
it's
it
like
won't,
that guy that yells at Forrest.
yeah. And
He's mean.
mhm. And God, what else? Oh, she eventually like hooks up with some stockbrokers at one point. There's that bit from the 1980s, I
Oh, I
think.
don't even remember that. I mean, is that when she's like, is that what was supposed to be going on when she's like standing up on the balcony, like almost jumping?
Yeah.
Oh, I didn't
Maybe
even.
they're not stockbrokers, but it has a very like 80s stockbroker
Yeah, she's
doing
doing like heroin.
cocaine.
Yeah, she's doing like heroin and cocaine. Yeah, I think you're
Mm.
right. That probably is what's supposed to be going on there.
Yeah. And she's like this kind of self-destructive party child who gives Forrest some pity sex and then disappears again, only to return so that he can take care of her when she dies.
Whereas in the book, the first time they have sex, the book literally says, "Oh no, they spent the entire after they spent like 8 hours. It wasn't one time in
Yeah.
in Forrest's double bed, and
Mm.
in his like little teen, like in his childhood home. No, no, no. It's like an entire afternoon where
They're
he's
in
like,
the sink. They're
yeah,
in
yeah. It's
the.
like there were places you could have sex I never knew about. Like again, I just think it would have been so much funnier if Forrest if Tom Hanks had to say the lines of the novel Forrest
Yeah.
Gump, because they're
Mm,
much funnier.
mm,
They are raunchy.
mm.
I mean, it's just like he has no. I mean, in the book, I think he only in the movie, I guess he never has sex with anybody until he has sex with Jenny that one time. In the book, he loses his virginity at like 13 to one of his teachers.
Mhm. It's his
Like,
border, right?
oh, it was the boarder. Sorry,
Mm,
sorry, sorry. It was the woman who
yeah.
was staying with him. But I
Mm.
thought she was like, wasn't she like tutoring him? Or I thought there was something
Oh,
where she
maybe
was
she was
tutoring him.
tutoring.
I thought she was supposed to be tutoring him or something. I don't remember. But the point is, like, this is not. The point is, this is not like the super innocent guy. And yeah, the Jenny character in the book, the Jenny character is the one who says, "We need to stop all this for us. Like, I want to settle down and have kids. Like, I want to have a family." And she says, she's like, "I want to go to church. I want to have a family. I want to have a house. Like, I don't want to do any of this anymore." It- Again, they don't. That's not what she is in the movie, and I don't
No,
know why. I mean, I guess I get why they did it because it offers contrast of he's completely unaware and she's too experienced.
he's innocent and she's corruption, I guess.
I don't know if it's corruption because I'm not sure they're giving. I don't think they're that
They're not
condemning.
condemning her,
No, but what's the
no.
word
And I
I'm
think
looking
that's
at?
they're not that yeah, I know what you're talking
Whatever.
about.
They're
Whatever.
not
But
condemning her. Yeah, I don't think they're condemning her as much in the movie. I don't think they would say she's corruption. I think it's that she is worldliness, maybe awareness. She's been shown too much of the world at too young an age. And whereas he and she actually sees very little, essentially. She's been shown too much of the world, but she's actually sees very little. Whereas Forrest sees more of the world. Actually, he sees like all the major highlights of their time, but
hmm,
he's less aware of it. I think that's the contrast
what
they're
they're going
going with
for.
there. But it's not like a particularly like okay, what does that tell me? Like not and I don't need to and I don't need it to tell me anything. Again, I think movies that do that are like, this is what I'm telling you, those are kind of boring. But what is it trying to explore? It doesn't reveal anything. It doesn't help me to understand
Hmm.
anything particular.
And part of the problem that because you could do something with that, right? As you're saying, if you're going to have worldliness and innocence meet, and kind of William Blake sort of famously did this well. There are different things. Well, there's really kind of fun, different kind of ironies you could do with that, but it turns into sap. And eventually
Yeah.
she comes back and she's sick, and then I think they marry, right? They marry.
Oh, do they? I don't
I
remember. It
don't
could be.
remember. I think they, now that she's dying, and
Certainly
then
sounds like a possibility, yeah.
yeah, and then he's the happiest I've ever been because Jenny was here all the time. And then then she has the AIDS
Reminds me of
baby,
the
and
ending of Strange Interlude. Like that. You ever
oh,
read
I don't think
Strange
I
Interlude?
haven't read that. No,
Yeah, it reminds me of the end. Well, then I'll ruin the ending for you.
yeah, that's fine.
It's like 7 hours long. But it reminds me of the ending of Strange Interlude, which is again, it sort of has this similar thing where it's somebody who's this guy who's just he's been in love with this woman his whole life, and he just wants to get her, wants to get her, wants to get her, and she keeps going. She literally keeps sleeping around with all these other men. She becomes a nurse during World War I, and she thinks the only way she can help the men who have lost like all their limbs is to just sleep with them. So she sleeps with everybody, and she's constantly doing all this stuff. And then finally, by the end, she has become completely exhausted and she can't do anything anymore, and she says, okay, I guess I'll stay with you now. That's sort of how it ends.
They go off into the sunset of sorts.
Yeah, I mean, again, I think it's supposed to be this idea of he's like, and finally I've won. And it's like, yeah, what did you win? That's kind of the point of the
Mm,
play.
yeah.
But that's always what this ending of Forrest Gump has reminded me of. But in Strange Interlude, it is trying to make a commentary. It's actually making a commentary not only on the man who stayed the whole time, but on her. And again, there's a lot of other stuff that goes on in between this all. But they're not making any commentary on her or him, really, right? I don't think
Yeah,
so.
they don't want to I mean, they don't want to say anything bad about him because there's nothing you can say bad about him other than he's just innocent. They don't even really want to laugh at him, even though they sort of unintentionally do. With
Even
her,
when Lieutenant Dan says it very clearly, don't you laugh at him. Don't you laugh at him. Lieutenant Dan gets very mad at the prostitutes who laugh at him.
oh yeah. Oh God, I forgot about that scene.
Yeah, which
Uh,
again, I've always thought I thought that was Lieutenant Dan yelling at the audience. I thought that was like the thing of like, don't
yeah.
you laugh at him.
Hmm.
It's sort of this idea of like, we're not supposed to laugh at him. We're supposed to see the world through him.
Through innocence, and he's so good in his pure heart.
Yeah, he sees through it all. Like, what?
But Jenny, we're not supposed to dislike her either because she's a
No.
victim of childhood abuse and this kind of train of bad men, and she can't help it because really because of her experiences as a child, she is now in self-destructive mode and has always been in self-destructive mode. So ultimately, this is really she is another
So they also
innocent.
take away her agency, I guess, in that sense
Yeah.
too.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
They remove her
Absolutely.
agency as well.
Yeah, it's just she's just passed around by bad men, starting with her father. And then in the end, she comes to realize as she's dying that Forrest is a good
Forrest
guy. She
was the
deserves a
guy.
good guy. She deserves to be with a good guy. Um, I don't really
Which I thought the book
know.
was going to try to go there at one point until they had Forrest, hooking up with the chicks in the alley, and I'm
Yeah.
like, oh no. Just sort of had this like Ross Geller Rachel feel where you're like, oh, he finally got her, and you're like, oh wait, he's kind of a douche.
Yeah.
And then, like, I don't know if this
Yeah,
actually is
he's
a good
guilty
thing.
of things. That's the thing
Yeah,
about he's
he's guilty. Yeah, he
guilty of
does
things.
things.
He
Yeah,
does things that are bad, and you don't hate him for it because he is kind of a big child. And so you're like, you shouldn't have done that. But like, I don't hate the character for it. He
yeah,
feels
not
completely
just.
contrite.
Yeah, it's yeah, and he feels very bad, and you sort of have this sense of he kind of knew what was going, but they don't be like he didn't know what sex was. It's like, and that's why it happened. It's like, no, they let him fail. It's not that he didn't know what he was doing with these women. It's that he just wasn't, he was so high, he wasn't really thinking about it, and he failed. Yeah, they let him fail. I don't think this Forrest Gump in the movie ever truly fail, like try to do something and not succeed at it.
Or does he do? They never. I
He
don't
doesn't
think
really
so.
try to do
He
anything.
doesn't try to do anything, and it's also the other thing is they don't have the courage to make him possibly a villain in any scene, right? He's not,
No,
or
no, you could
villain's
never
too strong a word, but
see him in anything with a good light. Yeah, that's true.
yeah, you can't do that. That's the bigger problem, and so therefore he's even more of a blank. And so you have, on the one hand, you have a blank upon which we can cast our memories of the greatest hits of the 60s and 70s, and maybe a little 80s. And then on the other hand, we want the end of the movie to be this tear jerking heartstring puller where a really good guy finally gets the love of his life. And when he loses her, he sits by her grave and cries and talks about how great Hallie Joel Osment is and how proud she would be of him if she were alive today, that type of thing.
Yeah.
And they're incoherent projects. They don't function together because if the character is sympathetic enough where we are drawn into him to be sad when he loses someone or loses the love of his life, he can't be a blank for the first 2 hours of the movie so that we can remember, I don't, the anti-war protests and Vietnam and I,
Elvis.
Elvis. Yes, he ran into Elvis
Yeah,
at one
and
point, things like that.
the Panther
Um,
Party was getting to
yeah,
the
it
Panther
can't be
Party.
Easter egg fest. He can't be
Yeah,
the
that's yeah.
the bank. He can't be the lawn upon which we gather Easter eggs. It's just and then expect him to be a fully fleshed out character for whom we feel devastated for at the end of the movie. These are different projects. They don't work together.
So why did it, well, I guess, we're kind of, why did it win? Like, why does this win? Why do people, why, yeah, I don't know if people still like this movie. Like, I feel like every person I talk to hates this thing, but I don't know. Maybe
Hmm.
it is just a generational thing. Maybe the boomers still really love it. Is that what it, is it just that? Like, is it just that simple?
I think it is like we titled this "Where Did We Come From?" Well, the title of this season, "Where Did We Come From?" Considering the short 20th century, and
Didn't I
this
call
is
this one Where Do We Come From? What Are We? Where Are We Going? I thought I gave it that title. I
oh,
didn't
we
give it
gave
that.
it that title, sure. Um, I
You know what
think
that's a reference to, right?
no, I
Where do we
don't.
come from? What are we? Where are we going? It's Paul Gauguin. It's a Gauguin painting.
Oh, right, okay, yeah, I know what you're talking about. Okay,
I like to make jokes that no one gets.
yeah, well. Anyway, I think this is probably popular because it's doing a little bit of that, trying to capture an error in its entirety. And he's not a terrible director. He knows how to define beats. He knows how to put little things in. Like when you see Gary Sinise's relatives, his past, his father, grandfather, and whatnot, dying, there is a sort of um, a sort of tonal consistency in that moment where he just has Gary Sinise playing all those bodies falling over in the exact same
It's a
way,
total consistency and it's efficient. It's
and it's
efficient
efficient.
storytelling. It's
Yeah.
efficient storytelling. Maybe the voiceovers are not always, voiceovers are a little bit of a lazy way,
Hmm.
but it's efficient. Tells
Yeah.
gets you the information about this character that you need to know and understand why he's going to be angry later. Got it. Makes sense.
Yeah. Yeah. And you had the tech in it is pretty good, and I think the technology in it, the special effects works pretty well. It's
It's aged well.
it's
Like
aged
it's not as if you're
extremely well. Yeah.
yeah,
Um,
it's not like I mean some of the CGI from the 2000s has aged very poorly,
mhm,
and this one's aged very well.
yeah. And I think it's just, it looks back on an era and tries to capture a moment. And it's filled with these little bit of melodramatic details that on their own could work. I think one example is when Forrest has to ask Jenny if the sun is like him, which I think is actually a nice little
That's
moment.
a really good moment. It's one of the best moments in the movie because this is you actually get to see him concerned about something. Like you get to see it and sort of the joy. Like that's a very good moment in the movie. And you get to see Forrest. You get to see Tom Hanks kind of show a little bit of chops there, instead of just sort of blankly staring at things. Even when his mother dies, you're sort of like, yeah, I mean, I feel bad that his mom dies, but he doesn't seem to care. Like I get the point. I get the point here that this is he's kind of shutting his mind off, and that's why you're not seeing it. And so, that I still, that line, she died on a Tuesday. That's still like there is a certain poignancy to that, but it doesn't carry the weight. But the like you can see it when he's doing the is he like me? And you can
Yeah,
see that there's this like, oh, that's actually works.
it works.
It's a very powerful moment of a person showing something like a
Mhm.
real level of emotion and concern in a particular moment that we can all understand and appreciate. And
And
that's a great moment in the
it's
movie.
a great moment. I think it's also, it's the point where he's not, it's the point where he's sort of self-critical about what type of this is going to sound bad, but it's not like, look at this lovable innocent person. He's like, no, there's something negative about this.
there's an understanding that he wishes that he didn't have the handicap.
Yeah.
Like I think
And it
that's just
would
what it
be
is.
good if his son doesn't have it.
Yeah,
And it's
it would be.
okay for
Yeah,
him to, yeah, to feel those things.
yeah.
That's a but within the broader context of the movie, I think you sprinkle moments in like that. You have this, we are capturing the age in the most cliched way possible, and I think people love it because they feel. I remember I read the Roger Ebert review in getting ready for
Did he
this.
like it?
Oh, of course, he loved it. If something wins an Oscar, Roger Ebert like just craps his pants with joy. That's. But it was it. He's never seen a movie that balances the kind of comic and episodic with real heartrending, heart-wrenching emotion. That type of thing. And I think
Yeah.
that's what people like about it. I think they feel that there is a real heart here, and also there is historical understanding, which is very important if you're making a serious movie.
There's no sense of historical understanding.
No, it's yeah,
It's like watching, your grandparents go through their slide reel. It's which is interesting. I'm not going to say it's not interesting to see some grandparents go through their slide reel, but that's not that doesn't give me an understanding of history. That just shows me pictures from history
yeah. Or it's
that
like
you're
the cover of Time magazine. I feel like I was looking at various covers of Time magazine,
yeah.
which is, it's good for getting an understanding of when things happened relative to other things, but that's about it.
Or understanding what people thought was important at a particular
Hmm.
time,
Yeah.
which is what the whole point of doing the best pictures for the podcast this year is. What did people think was particularly important at a particular time? I think the 90s was very much a retrospective.
Hmm.
90s very much feels like as you're approaching the millennium, there seems to be almost like a retrospective feel. Even something as dumb as Gladiator almost has this feeling of well, this is what happened in Rome. What will America be? Like it sort of has that kind of feeling of Rome will be a democracy again. And there's sort of this, we are the heirs of that. Like it sort of has a lot of those films have a retrospective feel to them. And this is the extreme of that.
Yeah, looking at the movies from 1995, there was Forrest Gump, one, Four Weddings and a Funeral, which is a movie that takes place in a contemporary setting. Pulp Fiction, also contemporary. Quiz Show, which takes place in, I think, the
60s?
1950s,
50s or
1960s.
60s. 50s or 60s somewhere.
And then The Shawshank Redemption, which also takes place going back there. um, then you also have for Best
That was
Direct,
a bad year.
it's a bad year, yeah. Um, but also with Best Director, though he didn't get nominated for Best Pic, or his picture didn't get nominated for Best Picture, was Bullets Over Broadway, which is also a kind of
Is that Woody Allen?
Woody Allen, yeah,
Yeah.
looking back type of thing. So I think there is this point of, yeah, of the kind of boomer generation sort of beginning to claim their legacy. Because if you think youngest, what's the earliest year a boomer can be born? Like 1950? Before then, you're sort of silent generation
I think it's like 47 technically, but yeah, in that area. I think it's
in
like
that area.
47. I think it's 47 technically or
Yeah. So
whatever. It's
by
around there,
now,
47, 48. Basically, it was when everyone came back. So they
mhm,
started coming back in like 47, 48. So I guess it's probably like 48 if you're going to go with like
go
when
with
they could have
that.
had children, but around there, 47, 48, I think it is.
So it's that generation would be our age or a little older.
Yeah.
And so I think this is the age, and I'm beginning to feel this. I'm not quite there yet, but where you're looking back on what did our generation do? Like, what is it defined as? That type of thing. And we're also, I think, young enough to go, well, our generation really hasn't, it's not over yet, right? It's not like the boomer generation, which is, they're in their 60s and 70s. Their great accomplishments are done pretty much. You can
Unless your
assess it.
Grandma Moses became very famous.
Oh, later. Okay, fair enough.
Yeah, like, I feel like that's every single time you see those things on Instagram, and they'll be like, "If you think that you're past, don't forget Robert Frost didn't publish his first book of poetry until he was 45. Don't you forget that Grandma Moses still continued to write. Became famous at the age of 78 or whatever it was.
Yeah, the Tolkien is one of those because I don't think he published Lord of the Rings till 44 is another one.
Something like
I
that.
don't,
Yeah, I know. I know. I think it was The Hobbit at 44.
or maybe it was The Hobbit at
I think it
44.
was The Hobbit at 44.
But
Yeah.
I still that may be
I
another
get your
thing.
point. Yeah,
It's
no,
yeah,
I'm being a jerk.
it's a mid. Oh, Ed Wood was also this year because Martin
I mean,
Landau
that
won.
shouldn't have won Best Picture, but that's a great movie.
Yeah, I didn't get nominated, but Ed
No,
Wood,
it shouldn't have
Martin
won. It shouldn't have won,
Landau.
but that's a great movie.
Yeah, Ed Wood's a lot of fun. Um,
And Martin Landau was really good in it. Yeah.
yeah,
You
but I think
have to be you have to be Hungarian and double jointed. No, I think it's double jointed and Hungarian.
yeah, that's a good Johnny Depp performance too. Um, that's a Johnny Depp performance that works.
Gee Willikers, Bella.
Yeah.
That is a
Uh,
very good Johnny Depp. That is a
yeah,
very good movie.
that's a
I
lot
would
of fun.
happily watch that movie again. I haven't seen it
Mm,
in years, but that's a great movie.
I
Again,
haven't seen that in a while.
I wouldn't put it as like a best picture winner, but it's a
Mm,
great movie. I just
yeah,
don't know what else that year could have won. None of those movies, I mean, are that great.
yeah. No, then I mean, I don't like. Well, Four Weddings and a Funeral, I think was fine. It's a serviceable romantic comedy, from what I
Yeah, that's what I
remember.
was gonna say. I'm like, it's not a great. I don't know why. That's like when as good as didn't as good as no as good as gets didn't win, but they
It won
won
the
best.
best
They
best.
won best actor and best actress. I don't. Did it win best? No, it didn't win best
I
picture.
don't think it was won best picture, but it won the acting awards, and it also won it. I think
Yeah.
for best supporting actor for Greg Kinnear. I think also won for
Oh
that
yeah, I
movie.
think you're right.
Yeah,
He actually gives a decent performance in that. But the thing is that's like another movie where I'm like, why was this so
so
popular?
popular.
Like, I remember seeing it in the theaters. That was when I used to go with my buddies and we would go to like because we had no money, so we go to like the matinees and you'd be like, it saves $3. I can get my Sour Patch Kids, and and you'd like go to see these things. I remember leaving being like, it's okay. Even at 12, I'm like, yeah, I mean, it was fine. And
Yeah.
then I remember like seeing the Oscars and you'd be like, that movie? Like,
That happened to me with Gladiator. And I saw Gladiator and was like, okay, okay, I guess it's entertaining. And then it was, this is the best picture of the year. And be like, did I miss something? Why? I probably should watch this again. I don't remember this being I thought it was like a summer blockbuster, like an
yeah.
action movie. I was shocked that it won Best Picture.
Well,
Um,
that was my experience, although on the opposite extreme. When I saw Million Dollar Baby, I just remember leaving Million Dollar Baby. That is still that is my standard for bad movies winning Best Picture. And I remember leaving that theater and being like, I hate it.
hmm,
So aesthetically, just
hmm,
directions, just
hmm.
plot. They pull some weird bait and switch halfway. Everything irritated me about that movie. I'm
The
like,
fight doesn't even make sense.
the fight, nothing. It's so bad. There is nothing redeemable about that movie. And then I just remember seeing with Best Picture being like, what the? What?
Why
That
is
is
this?
the worst.
Hmm.
I told you I was talking to somebody at like one of our old professors, and he said that he had a friend whose theory is that the Million Dollar Baby is the worst Best Picture winner ever, and I felt very vindicated because
Hmm.
and apparently the guy made a fairly good argument about every other bad Best Picture winner and made the
Hmm.
argument that Million Dollar Baby is the worst Best Picture winner ever. I hate that movie. But anyway, but yeah, it's like some of these movies. The '90s had a lot. I don't know what in the '90s and even
Hmm.
the 2000s had some good Best Picture winners, but the '90s had a lot of bad Best Picture winners.
I
English
saw.
Patient,
Yeah.
Unforgiven's fine,
Hmm.
and I Sounds of the Lambs is fine, but it's like
Hmm.
Unforgiven, Braveheart, this Titanic.
Yeah,
Shakespeare in
Titanic
Love
is.
is fine, but
Hmm.
like, why Shakespeare in Love?
I don't really. The era doesn't seem to have a real definition in the way the even the '80s did. I mean, might not like the best picture winners of the '80s or the most popular winners of the '80s, but I felt that generation had some sort of particular flavor. I can't
Yeah,
figure out. I'm going through the '90s movies, and we go back to like '99 Shakespeare in Love, '98 is Titanic, '97 is English Patient. 96 is Braveheart.
Braveheart.
95 is this film. Um,
94 is Schindler.
Schindler.
Yeah, 93
That's a little better.
is
I like Schindler. Is
Schindler. I
Unforgiven.
guess I do like Schindler. Yeah, Schindler is legitimately good. Of the ones we've listed so far, that is a legitimately very good movie. Um,
Yeah, this
yeah,
year is a little more interesting. 93 is a little more interesting, at least. Because you have Unforgiven 1, which I like. I mean, I know it's a
yeah,
Clint
it's
Eastwood
fine.
movie, but
It's
I think
fine.
it's
I don't
fine.
dislike Clint Eastwood per se. I just hate Million Dollar
Million Dollar
Baby.
Baby.
Unforgiven's
Yeah.
fine.
Yeah. That year also Howard's End. It's a really interesting movie. It has a great performance from Vanessa Redgrave in it. That
I saw her live in Much Ado About Nothing with James Earl Jones. That was a fun
uh,
production.
rest in peace.
Yeah,
I saw her live and then ran into her backstage with
that's fun.
Long Day's Journey into Night.
Oh, I love that play.
Yeah. But Howard's End, A Few Good Men, The Crying Game, which is
Oh,
an interesting movie. What?
the Crying Game. It's based on a gimmick.
Yeah. Yeah,
Like it's just they literally had to put up posters saying "Don't tell the ending of the
Mhm.
Crying Game." Like
With the
otherwise,
middle?
there's no reason to watch
There's
this movie. Sorry,
um, yeah, I guess
I don't know.
A Few
Anyway,
Good
sorry.
Men is
Your good man's
there.
fine.
Yeah. So that's a little different. I think Silence of the Lambs is the year before, that's 91.
And
And then
Dances with Wolves is here
90
before that.
is Dances
Dances
with
with Wolves, which is
Wolves.
also
Yeah.
trash. But it's like, there's some good movies in there, but I feel like there's just some really bad Best Picture winners in there. Um,
But my problem here is I don't see the pattern. I think it feels like it's an era in transition.
but that
And
might be a good thing. I mean, there's the '90s had some really great movies. The '90s had some really good movies. It was an era of experiment. Yeah, they were kind of playing around. They were trying new things. The studio system didn't feel like it was completely locked into just making more and more Avenger movies. Like there was a certain level of experimentation going on. None of them feel like there's some romantic comedies, there's some blockbusters, there's some action, there's some historical film, like there's historical epics. There's a nice blend in the '90s. I'm not saying that they're all good, but I don't, there's sort of a blend to some extent.
yeah, like this year, 1990, Dances with Wolves was against Awakenings, which is a movie
I don't
about.
know.
Awakenings is, I believe, with Robert De Niro and Robin Williams, and it's a true story about people who are in a catatonic state, and this doctor figured out a treatment that gets them out of it. And so it's about these people who are, and Robert De Niro
Interesting.
plays one of them who, it's like 20 years in a catatonic state, and suddenly he can connect with the world again. Um,
Who does Robin
Ghost,
Williams play? Is
the
he like
doctor who
like
comes up
Patch
with him.
Adams? So he's played Patch Adams, okay.
Yeah, I guess, yeah, Patch Adams, but who actually did something for someone. Um, there's Ghost was that year, Godfather
Oh,
Part 3,
ugh.
and Goodfellas were.
Goodfellas.
Yeah. Stephen Frears was nominated for The Grifters that year, even though his film wasn't nominated for Best Picture. Um, but yeah, I guess maybe it's a year in transition, and I'm not entirely sure it transitions well because if we're starting with Dances with Wolves and Silence of the Lambs, I hate Dances with Wolves. I mean, I think
Dances with
Million Dollar
Wolves is a
Baby.
very, very, very bad movie.
Yeah, I mean, I see your point about Million Dollar Baby being worse than Dances with Wolves, but Dances with Wolves is longer. So
Dances with Wolves is pretty though. I like some of the look of it. Dances with Wolves has some really beautiful shots of the prairie. It's pretty. Mandela Baby is ugly.
yeah, Million Dollar
Like
Baby,
and
I
just
just remember
again,
like a
it's just
green color.
dark. There's
It's
just no
dark and
it's
green. It's like this like
yeah.
puke green everywhere.
Yeah,
And
it's just a very it's an ugly movie. It's not even an attractive movie. Dances with Wolves, despite its stupidity, is pretty. There's a lot of beautiful shots. The costumes are actually quite good, I feel like, in there. There's a certain level of just kind of beauty to it,
mhm,
but at the same time, it's the rest. It's trash.
mhm,
But I think there's an attractiveness to just the images.
mhm. Yeah, I can see that. But so anyway, we're starting with like Dances with Wolves. Sure.
Sure, when we're
Sure.
going, but I guess if we're just comparing it to Million Dollar Baby,
Yeah,
that is
if
its
we're
benefit. It is attractive.
yeah,
it has some visually
visually
attractive images of the
appealing.
planes, and some of the costumes are pretty. I think some of the costumes are nice.
I'm the year after, so Silence of the Lambs. I'm not the biggest fan of Silence of the Lambs. I think it's
I thought you loved that movie.
no, I'm not the biggest fan.
Oh,
It's
okay.
just but it is fun to a certain point, which it kind of doesn't make any sense. But Hannibal Lecter's performance is fun. It's a fun performance
Yeah,
to watch. And then you have Schindler's List after that. So it's not. It's kind
that's
of a
the best of these. I think it's the
yeah,
best of all the '90s movies that we've gone through. Like
yeah.
that's a great movie.
I think Schindler's List. But then we end with. I mean, I don't mind Shakespeare in Love. I think Shakespeare in Love works.
It's fine.
It's fine. I think it's funny. It's a little geeky. But the year before that, we end with like 1998 with Titanic, which is a disaster.
Yeah,
It's a terrible movie. The English Patient is this kind of like
I've never seen it. I've
long.
heard it's terrible.
Yeah, it's
I've heard
very
it's
like it
unendurable.
yeah, it reminds me of those like like Giant, one of those movies from the 50s, one of those George Stevens movies. It's just this like long historical epic thing.
Yeah.
Um, that's a weird year too, though, because you have
It
English
well, it
Patient.
reminds you, I mean, having now seen it, it sounds like Out of Africa. It just reminds you of like from what I've heard of it, it sounds like that similar thing. Just big movie about historical time in exotic location, and Lord, you're gonna sit a long time to get through it. Like it just that's what it sounds like. I haven't seen it, but I just all I based it on the English Patient I based on Elaine Bennis's review of it, which is she thought it was terrible.
Oh, is that
In
what you said?
Seinfeld, that's the whole thing is everybody's talking about how great the English Patient is, and she's going, "It's terrible. I want to go see." I think it's like Naked like Lunch or something. She wants to go see some like terrible like romantic, just sort of like
No, Naked
Three
Lunch is
Stooges.
not a romantic
Yeah,
comedy.
I know that's true. No, I know that's the Norman Mailer one. No, it's
No,
something
it's
like
a Cronenberg movie. It's
I thought it was
Burroughs.
Norman. I thought it was
William S.
Norman.
Burroughs wrote the book, and then the movie, which is very different, is David Cronenberg.
Okay, it's not that one. But the point is, it's some sort of stupid movie. She wants to go see some. Didn't Mailer write it something like anyway? No, the point is she wants to go see some stupid movie that's supposed to be like a Three Stooges like
Type thing.
Tommy Boy type thing. So she thinks that sounds funny,
Mhm.
and everyone keeps saying she has to go see The English Patient. Um, which they do have a pretty good. That's also the episode. It's not the same episode, but like I like the Seinfeld one where he falls asleep during Schindler. Oh no, he's making out during
He's
Schindler's
speaking that,
List.
and and
Yeah,
his parents catch him.
yeah. His parents catch him
We're making out during
during
Schindler's
Schindler's
List.
List. But
Uh,
I just Elaine Bennett hates the English Patient, and everyone, and I think her boss makes her like say that she likes the English Patient, and like the whole thing is everyone keeps telling her the English Patient's a great movie. Um, but yeah, there's just no good movie. There's a lot of not great movies, especially towards the end there.
yeah.
But the 2000s, I mean, and then early in the 2000s, there's some bad ones. There's like Beautiful Mind, and there's Gladiator, Beautiful Mind. Then there's like what else is in there? Chicago's in there. Chicago's good.
Chicago's very soon
Chicago's
into the
2002, I think. But it's Beautiful Mind. Oh, American Beauty. That's the one I'm forgetting.
American
It's
Beauty is
American Beauty,
2000.
Beautiful Mind. Those are bad. Then you get Chicago, which is pretty solid. And then I think it's Return of the King, which is the best of those.
Yeah. Yeah, it seems like you moved into these bigger blockbuster type things. Though to be fair, looking at A Beautiful Mind, I don't know. I still am not getting a sense of it. I'm getting this kind of like up and down. There seems to be these big, expensive movies like Gladiator, like Titanic, that are not only blockbusters, but they're considered quote unquote excellent filmmaking. And then you get like the year of Beautiful Mind. If you look at the other films there, first of all, Beautiful Mind is this. I don't think it's very good, but it isn't. It isn't
Well,
like Titanic or.
is it a swing? Are people just going from like giant blockbuster to basically biopic?
Yeah, maybe.
You know,
But look, if you look at the year of Beautiful Mind, which is '02, you have Gosford Park in the
that's great.
bedroom, which I love Gosford Park, but in the
I love
bedroom, I don't know
Gosford.
if you know that.
Never even heard of it.
It's a movie about an old couple who live in a village in Maine that captures lobsters. And it's them and their daughter, and they live in this house together. And it has some big, like Sissy Spacek's in it, but it's a pretty contained movie. It's not any good, but it's also it's not A Beautiful Mind, right? It's not Gladiator. Then Lord of the Rings, the first Lord of the Rings, and then Moulin Rouge came out then as
Again,
well.
I will always give musicals some credit because I don't particularly like them, but it does take a certain level of boldness to do them in film. I will
Yeah,
always give them a little bit of credit, but
and you also always want the good one. You're almost hoping that even if it's bad, it
you're
will
waiting for
make
Chicago.
money. Yeah.
Well, you're also waiting for Chicago. Chicago's great. That is a great, great, great movie.
Yeah, and that's the next year is
Yeah.
Chicago. Um, yeah, so I don't know what it
I
is
don't
about
know.
the 90s. I mean, we're talking about the 90s now, but I think just from a kind of boomer perspective, which is pretty necessary to look at when looking at Forrest Gump, it is the midlife crisis movie. It's where you're looking back on your life and remembering the glory moments and kind of inserting yourself into those glory moments.
Yeah.
Looking back on history and kind of plugging yourself in there.
70
And
are the years of our life. And then they're
yeah,
basically, yeah, let's stick ourselves into this thing. Yeah.
yeah, I think that's what it is. I think it is a midlife crisis. That's what this movie is. And maybe that's what the 90s are. I mean, it's not.
So that's what we're gonna call it. That's I shouldn't have called it 90s, the boomer midlife crisis.
Maybe it is. But I can't.
I know I don't
Yeah,
disagree.
yeah,
I think you're onto something.
yeah. But I don't say, and it seems like the 2000s, there's a bit of a recovery. Although maybe I'm giving Lord of the Rings too much credit for the decade. But
But Chicago's really good. I mean, there are some good movies in the
Chicago's
2000s. Chicago's
good.
really there's at least of the best picture winners in the 90s. I think the only one that is really good is Schindler. At least of the I can think of three of the ones in the 2000s are really good. Chicago, um, Return of the King, and No Country. Those are all
Hmm.
good movies in
And
the 2000s.
yeah, you also see other things that are nominated that aren't bad.
Gosford Park is
Gosford
good. Yeah.
Park. I'm looking at with Lord of the Rings. It was nominated next to Lost in Translation, which I think is a pretty good movie. I like Seabasket. That was also nominated that year. The year after, oh, Million Dollar Baby was the year after.
Yeah, no, no, no.
Who did that beat? Oh, it
It
beat
beat Aviator, didn't
it
it?
beat Aviator. I really
Yeah, it beat
liked
Aviator.
Aviator.
Yeah, Aviator was pretty good.
I like it beat Aviator. It beat Ray.
Oh
Um,
yeah, Holy Cross. Yeah,
yeah, Howard Baldwin.
yeah.
It beat Sideways and Finding
That
Neverland.
means Sideways is so stupid, but it's fine.
It's fine. I don't mind Sideways.
They're all of those are better than Million Dollar Baby, but it's hard to be worse. But like Sideways is stupid. And then what was the last one did you say? Oh,
Finding
Finding
Neverland.
Neverland. Yeah,
Eh, yeah. But did Ray get? Oh, and Ray, yeah, Ray got
and
nominated.
Ray. And Ray
Hmm.
is good. Actually, I like Ray.
Ray's
I do
fine,
like Ray.
yeah, until
Yeah,
the
Ray's
end.
fine.
Oh, the
I
movie
don't
after
remember the
that
end.
is real bad. Where that scene where he like takes off his glasses and has a dream conversation with his mother.
Oh, I
Do you
might have
remember that
zoned out
scene?
by
Oh,
that
it's a
point. I
bad
might have zoned
scene
out by
where
that point.
he like takes
I
off
saw
his
that in the theaters. I haven't seen it since then, so it's been
uh
20 years since I saw it.
since I've seen it. Yeah,
I remember liking it, but I don't remember that scene. I probably made fun of it on the way out. Yeah.
yeah. But and the year after that, do you know what movie came out the year after that?
Crash?
Crash.
Yeah.
Good. Oh, that was a so it's Crash, Brokeback Mountain. and Munich were all in the same year.
Yikes.
Yeah, that's
Yeah,
a.
yikes. What are the other two?
The other one's with Capote, which
I
I
really like
like
Capote.
that
I
movie. That's a
really like
good
Capote.
movie.
I love
And
In Cold Blood, so I
mm,
really like Capote actually.
yeah, just the idea of like, I don't have an ending for my book. I need an ending for my
Yeah,
book. This guy has to
this guy
die.
has to die. So I
Yeah,
mean, it's just yeah, that's a great.
it's a
It's
good
just
movie.
such a good movie.
And then the other one I liked, Good Night and Good Luck, which is
I haven't
fine.
seen that, but I heard that was fine. Yeah,
It's a George Clooney movie about Edward R. Murrow, and it's fine.
it's fine.
Yeah. Um, but yeah, so the 2000s are a little less defined.
Yes. Well, so next week we
Mhm.
get my one of my favorite movies of the 2000s, Brokeback Mountain. Oh no, sorry. What is that one called?
No Country
But
for
No
Old
Country.
Men.
Not.
Yes. Oh God, I actually
Brokeback Mountain isn't a bad movie. Brokeback Mountain was just overhyped because of its topic, which I get. I understand the reason why it was overhyped. I don't think it's a terrible movie.
it's not the end of the world, but I
No,
mean, the
but it was
problem with
overhyped.
it is that because of its topic, it affects the way they make the movie, where it's just like this is a grand social tragedy, as opposed to a romantic story about two people.
Yeah,
It's interesting because I read the source material of it. It's based on a short story, and it adapts almost every single thing from the short story. It follows it incredibly closely, and so it's just an interesting adaptation thing to deal with. But the sort
it's just
of
it had some serious problems because of the topic. Anyway, we're getting way off topic,
yeah,
but
yeah, yeah.
maybe we'll do it someday. But it's not a bad movie. It's just it got overhyped and it got overblown in the making of it and in the public reception to it. But it's
Yeah.
not a bad
It's one
movie.
of these things people call important. And when you start calling a
Yeah, and when
movie
you start calling movies
important,
important,
you basically drown any kind of value it has.
but we now get to go onto one of my favorite movies of the 2000s, which is No Country for Old Men next week, which I love that movie. So we'll go to that one next week.
You can rate and review this show anywhere fine podcasts are available. For those viewing in YouTube land, if you haven't already, please like this video, subscribe to the Talking Studios channel for all our exciting content, and follow us on social media at Talking Studios. Check out other shows by Talking Studios, including Talking Pictures Trivia, where we explore movies through trivia, Keep Making Movies, where we explore micro-budget films, Limited Lexicon, where we play through text-based adventure games, and Get the Point, where we slowly reveal a movie poster and try to guess which movie poster it is. Got a question for us? Call the Talking Studios hotline at 201-467-8679 and leave a message. It may be featured on a future episode. And if you haven't already, please subscribe to Adapt It, wherever fine podcasts are found. Join us next time when we discuss What Are We? Moral Malaise and Adapting a Modern Classic, and look at No Country for Old Men, both the book and the movie.
Wow, Talking Studios.
Next week, we'll be discussing No Country for Old Men. Pat, if you could give No Country for Old Men an award, what award would it be?
I would give it, and this one actually, I mean, I guess it's sort of tongue in cheek, but it is legit. I think it is the most recent, actually good Best Picture.
Okay.
I think of the ones that I have seen, I think it is the most recent Best Picture, good Best Picture. I think a lot of the recent ones, not to say that they've been bad, like King's Speech is fine, it's like Argo is fine. Like some of these movies have been fine, but they haven't been particularly like the best picture of that year, or I think just like even like a really good movie. This one is an actually good movie. So I would say most recent best picture.
Yeah, this movie is profound. When you think of the best of something, it's usually has a quality of being profound. And I think movies in this era, for whatever reason, tend be better when they're humbler. Like King's Speech it's not a particularly profound movie. It's a man gets over a speech impediment and gives a speech. But, it's
Yeah,
going to
and
be
it's good.
fine. And it's
It's
good
fine.
and it works.
Yep.
It has pretty clear characters, whatever. And I mean, Argo I haven't seen, but my understanding is that's a bit more of a kind of
It's just
fun
a
romp.
that's just a fun romp. I'm shocked that it won Best Picture, but it's fun. I saw it in theaters and went, yeah, that's a good movie. I enjoyed that. It was fine. It was sort of there was nothing shocking about it. In some ways, it was similar to The Sting. Or no, is it? Yeah. In the sense, was it The Sting? No.
The 70s movie
Yeah, was that what it was
that we
called?
did?
The one,
That's
yeah,
what
it
yeah,
was
yeah.
about The
The
Sting.
Sting
Okay.
it's called The Sting.
Okay, again, they're blending together. The Sting, it reminds me of The Sting to some extent, in the sense that The Sting was certainly better. I think its script is better and it sort of has more of a sense. But it's just sort of it was a fun movie that I think a lot of people watched and liked. It's not teaching anything. They're not meant to do very much. It was just a fun movie, and the Sting and Argo remind me of that. But No Country is profound. It is a really good movie with a lot to say in a really stylish and fun, non-pretentious way.
I agree entirely. So
What
my
award are you
award,
giving? Did you give
what
an
am I
award or
award? I
no?
haven't given an award yet. No. So I couldn't pick which one. I have Best Haircut for a Villain award, which I think a lot of people have commented on. Also, I would say Best projectile sound effects. I think these are my favorite projectile sound effects in a movie. His shotgun with a silencer on it sounds awesome, and I love the cattle killing device, the way that shoots things out. I just love the sounds of those things. Even the sound of the metal on the gas container as it's
Oh yeah,
dragged
that's
on
really
the
good. Yeah.
ground and you hear it opening it.
There's
It
a
has
number of I like well maybe we'll get into it next week. I do like the sound and I actually did want to talk about the sound a bit. So maybe we'll save it
yeah,
because
the sound is
I really like the sound. I don't know if it won best sound that year, but it certainly has
It
really good sound.
it did get nominated for Best Sound Editing and Best Sound Mixing. So it got those two
Okay.
nominations.
Well, we'll talk about
But yeah,
sound.
the sound is very interesting.